The nightmare for writer-director James Cameron didn't lie with AI in this sequel to his surprise 1984 hit. It lay in trying to get this legendary film off the drawing board in the first place. And even when he did manage to do that, the production schedule was so tight that it regularly sparked his famously short temper, to the extent that crew members wore specially printed t-shirts like a badge of honor. Cameron's first headache was trying to prize his creation from the financially troubled Hemdale Film Corporation, which owned 50% of the rights to the Terminator. This was a huge barrier to his dream of making the sequel, and it was Arnold Schwarzenegger's towering frame that finally smashed that barrier. Schwarzenegger managed to convince Carolco, who he'd recently worked for on Total Recall, to acquire the rights to the Terminator from Hemdale and produce the sequel themselves. Negotiations were a minefield, but Hemdale finally agreed to sell the rights to Carolco, and Cameron finally had the green light to craft a screenplay. His co-writer, William Wisher, who makes an appearance in Judgment Day, thought that the idea of having the young John Connor bond with Schwarzenegger's T-800 was something of a joke. But Cameron saw the move as an echo of the Tin Man receiving a heart in The Wizard of Oz. In early drafts of the screenplay, the two Terminators that would be sent back in time would be identical T-800s, both played by Schwarzenegger. Wisher suspected that a fight between the two would be somewhat boring, so Cameron dropped the plan for that better idea that he'd had for the original Terminator from 1984. In early drafts of that screenplay, a liquid metal Terminator was the second killer robot to be sent back in time. A Terminator that could take the form of and impersonate just about anything around it. The practical effects of the early 80s simply weren't capable of portraying that vision on the big screen, but after Cameron's pioneering work with CGI in 1989's The Abyss, he realized that the new technology was his key to finally bringing that advanced T-1000 Terminator to life. And that Terminator would be played by the brilliant Robert Patrick. He appears twice more in my DVD collection, in the 1993 alien abduction film Fire in the Sky, and as Agent Doggett, Mulder's replacement in The X-Files. One of the many omissions from the final screenplay was a 9-minute opening sequence of a machine propelling a Terminator back in time. And it's a shame that sequence was never shot, because judging by Cameron's impressive designs for vehicles and machines in both the Terminator and Aliens, his concept for a time machine would certainly have been something to see. Cameron wanted an unknown to play the young John Connor, and after an extensive search, Edward Furlong was chosen for the role. As well as being taught to ride a motorbike, Furlong was trained to handle and shoot firearms. Another newcomer to the franchise was Joe Morton, who would play cybernetics expert Dr. Miles Dyson, the creator of the chip that would lead to the creation of Skynet. That role, though, was initially offered to Denzel Washington, who would turn it down because he felt the character was riddled with fear. As ever, Cameron would include actors he'd worked with before, in this case, Jeanette Goldstein, who played Vasquez in Aliens and the part of John's foster mother in Judgment Day. Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton were the most crucial returnees to the franchise, but the hero of the original Terminator, Kyle Reese, played by Michael Biehn, also made a return in the form of a dream sequence alongside Linda Hamilton. Sadly, that scene never made the final cut. Despite the film's polished look and feel, the shooting schedule was far too tight for Cameron's liking, and he actually cancelled Christmas to catch up with the schedule, demanding that Schwarzenegger did the same. The editing process for the film was a free-for-all as far as tightening its pace was concerned. Many scenes that have become familiar to us only through the DVD releases weren't in the original cinematic release. These included the T-1000 killing John's dog, and John attempting to teach his Terminator to act more human-like. An elaborate ending scene set in 2029 also found its way to the cutting room floor. It featured Sarah Connor, now a grandmother, sitting on a park bench while her narration explained that Skynet's nuclear holocaust had been prevented. Cameron was uneasy about many aspects of this scene and replaced it with a simpler ending. Judgment Day is a renowned landmark for early CGI, but the sequence that it's most famous for, the nuclear attack, is a mixture of CGI, practical effects, and miniatures. This sequence is still considered to be one of the best depictions of a nuclear explosion ever created on screen. This long-awaited sequel to the Terminator was greeted with open arms by fans of the original and by newcomers to the franchise alike. Its theatrical release catapulted it up the all-time box office charts to become the third highest-grossing film in history in its time. You've been watching the final part of a series on Hollywood's AI nightmares, which also includes The Matrix, Westworld, Colossus the Forbin Project, and The Terminator.